welcome back to the first episode of Season 2's SMBN Shred With Your Head show. Yes, finally back after a few months off, and it feels great, so good to be back with our members, you guys. So I've missed my time away, and I've been very busy during my time away. First off, it takes a lot of effort to stay focused on my senior year of high school. And I wish my mom would remind me just once, please, to stay focused on this work. Yes, Mom, I'm not slacking off my final year. I also spent last fall working on college essays and submitting my college applications. I am now waiting to hear back, which is the hardest part. All of a sudden, I am very aware of the mailman's schedule, and who knew he didn't come on Sundays? Has it always been that way? I'm convinced that all my acceptance letters are coming on Sundays. I did also find some time to go snowboarding and mountain biking during my time away. And if you're wondering about the picture in the background, that is Rider of the Week. We did not do our homework and get a Rider of the Week, so the Rider of the Week is me at my race in Fontana last week. And by the way, Fontana is a great race circuit. I'll put the link to that down below, but really fun. So I'll be getting some stickers to Justin, myself, me, whatever. And oh, yes, and another thing that I did over this break, maybe I can get some street cred for this. I got to go on a personal tour of Red Bull's media facilities in Santa Monica, and they showed me where they do their live show feeds, their in-house live broadcasting booth, their video editing, their esports studio, their large in-house theater, and many other cool things. I also wanted to give a special thanks to Nathan Moss for giving me this tour, and I believe I have found the place I want to work. It makes two of my favorite things, extreme sports and film. Oh, yeah, I also love to drink because that's the main thing they do, but yeah, that too. So for anyone at Red Bull Media watching this, I'm hardworking, cheap liver, and well-spoken. I speak good. Summer internship before I head to college next fall, maybe, question mark. So, okay, enough of me, back to the show. Not only is this our first episode of Season 2, it also happens to be our 10th anniversary episode. Not 10 years, because that would make me 7 when I started the show. This is our 10th episode, so that kind of 10. So I worked on a very special show using a cool new tool to help me explain biking topics. And this biking topic is something that we've all struggled with at some point, geometry. No, not that stuff you learned your freshman year or whatever in high school. Don't worry, you have to find the area of a circle or write out a proof or calculate the mass of the sun. We're going to be talking about bike geometry. We're going to be talking about all the angles and lengths, and what they mean, how they affect your riding style, and what you should look for in these numbers for the best bike for you. I hope you find all this information very useful. But first, breaking news. It's raining. It's raining in California. If you live in California, you know it's raining. And that does not mean good for mountain bikes. It means it's muddy, it's not fun, it's boring, not fun, muddy. It's raining. And secondly, on breaking news, we have news from YT. So a few weeks ago, YT released a few articles called Find Your Young Talent. And in these articles, it featured an Ironman nun, a downhill skateboard championship, an MMA office worker, and the dog father. So we're not really sure what this means, but it is typical of YT to have these press releases or these articles or this information be spewed out to the world and it be very confusing. But we do think that since there's these big names, we do think that it is one of two things. We do believe here at SMBN that it is either A, a new bike that they're going to be releasing soon, or B, a new rider. Comment below what you guys believe. That's it for breaking news. Now, bike geometry. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while because this is a subject that used to confuse me a lot. How many of you look at one of those bike geometry charts and it's about as clear as the periodic table posted on the wall of your science classroom? Not very clear, is it? I'm going to break down bike geometry into a few key terms and measurements that can really make a huge difference into how a bike climbs, descends, and handles. And all of these can be very helpful in selecting a bike that fits your desired riding style. So let's simplify bike geometry. I'm going to use my cool special whiteboard drawing tool for this. So yeah, let's have some fun. Okay, so this is our new whiteboard video tool that we'll be using to help us teach certain mountain biking topics, and today's topic is bike geometry, so let's get started. When defining and selecting your bike geometry, there's always a balance and weighing of the differences in things like fork angle, handlebar size, and stem length, and many other bike measurements in creating the type of ride for your mountain bike. And the selection and the choice in these will either lean your bike more towards a mountain bike that has a nimble ride or a mountain bike that has more of a stable ride. A nimble ride is best for cross-country riding. It's better for making quick turns and going up rocky hills. While a more stable ride is better suited for or geared more towards downhill riding because it's better set up for cornering downhill speeds and gives the rider the ability to ride at higher speeds. So when you are making these types of bike geometry decisions, you need to weigh in the trade-offs of having a bike with a nimble ride or a bike with a stable ride, and which type of ride is more important to you. So let's get into defining bike geometry. And instead of getting into a bunch of complex geometry charts of numbers, I've simplified it. I've broken the bike geometry down into 4 simple terms that I will define and discuss over the next 10 minutes. Check out my cool bike drawing that I will use to help me explain this topic. So the 4 terms are long, slack, height, and accessories. Each of these will affect the type of riding a bike will have. So let's start with the first term, long. In bike geometry discussions, long is defined as the front center measurement on a bike. Okay, so what is that? I will bring in my bike diagram to help show this as I show here in red. The front center is the distance from the front axle to the bottom bracket of your pedal crank. The longer this distance is, the more stable the bike will be. And it will be less nimble. And so the shorter the distance this is, the more nimble the bike will be, but it will have less stability. Our next topic or term to discuss is slack. Slack is the angle on the front tube and on the seat tube. So I know that is a little confusing, a little scary, but don't worry, I'll explain what this all means. Let's bring back out the bike to help me explain this. The smaller angle, and when I say smaller angle, I mean lower number, means it is more slack. The larger angle, which means a larger number, translate into less slack. There are 2 angles or measurements when looking at slack. Shown here are the 2 angles I have drawn. So first off, the front tube angle is the angle at which your forks are. If you have an imaginary line flat at the bottom of your fork and you measure the angle to the fork, that is the fork angle, shown here with this green line. And the second angle is the seat tube angle. If you have an imaginary line from your bottom axle to your bottom bracket and now measure the angle to that seat tube, that is the seat tube angle. For both of these angles, a smaller angle means larger slack and larger angle means smaller slack. And the more slack or less the angle, the more stability the bike or the less nimble it will be. The less slack or greater angle, the more nimble the bike will be, but will have less stability. The front tube angle will usually range between 64 and 70 degrees, with downhill being closer to 64 degrees. And cross-country bikes will be closer to 7-degree measurements. One measurement can affect another measurement. So, as you already see, decreasing slack can also affect long. A lower angle with more slack can push out the front end and hence increase the long measurement as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk about height measurement in bike geometry. Height is defined as the distance between the bottom bracket pedal and the ground. Taking our same bike drawing as in the previous example, height is measured distance from the center of the pedal crank to the ground, also referred to as bottom bracket height. The lower the height is, the more stability for the bike, but that means it's less nimble. The larger the height is, the more clearance and more nimbleness the bike will have, but the less stable the bike will be at high speeds. However, if your height is too low, you have a less clearance, and that increases your chances of pedal strike or banking it going over rocky sections. A lower bottom bracket creates a lower center of gravity, which is much better for faster cornering and holding a traction in a turn. So you may think that downhill bikes would then have a smaller height measurement because of the need for stability and faster cornering at high speeds. However, downhill bikes will actually have a sitting height measurement that is larger, about 350 millimeters, while a cross-country bike can be as low as 330 millimeters. This is because downhill bikes have much more flex in their bikes, so it sinks down more when riding, which requires the need to have a larger bottom bracket height to start with. So now there is the topic of accessories, which I have grouped some of the key bike accessories, their measurements, and how these accessories affect your riding, and the expected measurements for your specific riding styles. I again will use our handy bike diagram. The three accessories that I will review are handlebars, which I think we all know what those are, then bar stem, which not everyone knows what it is. It is the accessory that connects the handlebars to the frame, and last accessory is the fork offset, which I will take some time to explain all the variations in measurement of these and how they will affect your ride. For handlebars, the size will range from 650 millimeters to as large as 820 millimeters. Narrow bars are more for cross-country, and wider bars are usually for downhill. And now bar stem. These will range anywhere between 40 to 50 millimeters for downhill and as long as 110 to 120 for cross-country. The longer the stem, the more stability and less nimbleness, and the shorter the stem, the less stable but definitely more nimble. One thing to understand is that bar width is closely linked to stem length. As riders add bar width, they should also reduce stem length. The reason for this is because to provide the right mix of stability and nimbleness. So, for example, downhill riders have wide bar handles because it means that they're more stable at high speeds, but choose a short stem because it means that they have the ability to make quick direction changes. A cross-country rider usually has short bars because they want more nimbleness for the rocky climbs, but also they want a longer stem so that they have more stability when leaning over the front. Okay, so now we have fork offset. This can range between 40 and 50 millimeters. The smaller the offset, the more stable, the less nimble the handling of the bike. You may still be thinking, well, what is fork offset? It's a little more complex than any other topics, but don't worry, that is why we're here. Imagine a line is going straight down from the front axle to the ground where the tire touches the ground. Now imagine a line continuing from the fork to the ground at the same angle as the front fork. This spot right here is where the fork would extend to the ground. The distance between these two lines, from where the wheel touches the ground and the imaginary line from the fork to the ground, this is the trail length. A bike's trail length can be increased by using a fork with a smaller offset, and a smaller offset will move the fork forward. And now, if you draw another imaginary line from the new fork placement, you will see the front fork offset lines move to the right place. As you see, the distance between these two lines is greater, or in other words, the trail length increases. More trail also means more length. We will now summarize what we have learned about bike geometry and the various items that make up a bike's geometry. Bike geometry measurements are a balance, or a trade-off, between a bike that is nimble and very maneuverable and a bike that is stable and handles best at high speeds. So in this tutorial, we have reviewed the bike measurements and topics of long, slack, height, handlebar length, bar stem length, and last but not least, fork offset. For long, a longer distance means more stable and less nimble, and shorter long distance means more nimble and less stable. For slack, the smaller the front fork angle means increase in slack, while larger front fork angle means a decrease in slack. With height, the distance from pedal crank to the ground, the higher means more nimble and less stable, and the lower the height means more stable and less nimble. Handlebar length, the wider the bars, the more stability and less nimbleness. The smaller the bars, the less stable but more nimble. For bar stem length, the increase or longer the stem length will increase the bike's stability, while the shorter or a decrease in the stem will increase the bike's nimbleness. And finally, fork offset. A decrease in the fork's offset will increase the length and stability, while an increase in the fork offset will make the bike less stable but more nimble. Downhill bikes will usually sit on the right side of this scale, while cross-country bikes will usually be on the left side of this scale. So now for cross-country riders and downhill riders. For long, downhill riders would have long, while cross-country riders would have shorter bikes because of the different types of riding have different needs. For slack, XC bikes are going to be less slack, while downhill bikes are going to be more slack. For height, downhill bikes are going to be less height because they need better cornering and more stability with speed, while XC riders need the height for better clearance and more nobility. With handlebar length and handlebar stem, downhill riders will have a wider handlebar because it means that they're more stable at high speeds, but choose a short stem because it means they have the ability to make quick direction changes. And cross-country riders usually have short bars because they want more nimbleness for the rocky climbs, but also want a longer stem so they have more stability by leaning over the front. They both want the best of both worlds. And finally, fork offset. XC riders are going to have a smaller offset because they have less slack bikes, while DH bikes or downhill bikes will have a larger offset because they have more slack bikes with smaller head angles. Okay, so that wraps our episode 10, which is actually episode 1 of season 2, numbers, geometry, math. So I'm really glad to actually be back here in my garage and talking about biking with you guys, and hopefully by breaking down all these numbers and bike geometry to basic terms, long, slack, height, and accessories. It was helpful, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed telling you. I also enjoyed reading up and learning more for this episode. I learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot, and I hope you guys use this and enjoy your bikes, and it was good for you. So thanks for watching. Please send me your feedback, and go out and make it a good day to ride.